Before we begin the video, please head on over to Patreon, linked in the description below, where you can help support the channel and request content to be made. Thank you very much. And now, a passage from Frederick Jackson Turner's The Frontier in American History, from Chapter 6, The Significance of the Mississippi Valley in American History. The rise of a company of sympathetic and critical students of history in the South and in the West is bound to revolutionize the perspective of American history. Already, our Eastern colleagues are aware in general, if not in detail, of the importance of the work of this nation in dealing with the vast interior and with the influence of the West upon the nation. Indeed, I might take as the text for this address the words of one of our Eastern historians, Professor Albert Bushnell Hart, who a decade ago wrote, "The Mississippi Valley yields to no region in the world in interest, in romance, and in promise for the future. Here, if anywhere, is the real America, the field, the theater, and the basis of the civilization of the Western world. The history of the Mississippi Valley is the history of the United States. Its future is the future of one of the most powerful of modern nations." If those of us who have been insisting on the importance of our own region are led at times by the enthusiasm of the pioneer for the inviting historical domain that opens before us to overstate the importance of our subject, we may at least plead that we have gone no further than some of our brethren of the East, and we may take comfort in this declaration of Theodore Roosevelt. The states that have grown up around the Great Lakes and in the valley of the upper Mississippi are the states which are destined to be the greatest, the richest, the most prosperous of all the great rich and prosperous commonwealths which go to make up the mightiest republic the world has ever seen. These states form the heart of the country geographically, and they will soon become the heart in population and in political and social importance. I should be sorry to think that before these states there loomed a future of material prosperity merely. I regard this section of the country as the heart of true American sentiment. In studying the history of the whole Mississippi Valley, therefore, the members of this association are studying the origins of that portion of the nation which is admitted by competent Eastern authorities to be the section potentially most influential in the future of America. They are also studying the region which has engaged the most vital activities of the whole nation, for the problems arising from the existence of the Mississippi Valley, whether of movement, of population, diplomacy, politics, economic development, or social structure, have been fundamental problems in shaping the nation. It is not a narrow, not even a local interest, which determines the mission of this association. It is nothing less than the study of the American people in the presence and under the influence of the vast spaces, the imperial resources of the great interior. The social destiny of this valley will be the social destiny and will mark the place in history of the United States. In a large sense, and in the one usually given to it by geographers and historians, the Mississippi Valley includes the whole interior basin, a province which drains into nearly 2,000 miles of navigable waters of the Mississippi itself, 2,000 miles of the tawny flood of the Missouri, and 1,000 miles of the Ohio, 5,000 miles of main water highways open to the steamboat, nearly 2.5 million square miles of drainage basin, a land greater than all Europe except Russia, Norway, and Sweden, a land of levels marked by essential geographic unity, a land estimated to be able to support a population of 200 or 300 millions, 3 times the present population of the whole nation, an empire of natural resources in which to build a noble social structure worthy to hold its place as the heart of American industrial, political, and spiritual life. The significance of the Mississippi Valley in American history was first shown in the fact that it opened to various nations visions of power in the New World. Visions that sweep across the horizon of historical possibility like the luminous but unsubstantial aurora of a comet's train, portentous and fleeting. Out of the darkness of the primitive history of the continent are being drawn the evidences of the rise and fall of Indian cultures, the migrations through and into the Great Valley by men of the Stone Age, hinted at in legends and languages, dimly told in the records of mounds and artifacts, but waiting still for complete interpretation. Into these spaces and among the savage peoples came France, and wrote a romantic page in our early history, a page that tells of unfulfilled empire. What is striking in the effect of the Mississippi Valley upon France is the pronounced influence of the unity of its great spaces. It is not without meaning that Radisson and Groseilliers not only reached the extreme of Lake Superior, but also in all probability entered upon the waters of the Mississippi and learned of its western affluent. That Marquette not only received the Indians of the Illinois region in his post on the shores of Lake Superior, but traversed the length of the Mississippi almost to its mouth, and returning revealed the site of Chicago. That La Salle was inspired with the vision of a huge interior empire reaching from the Gulf to the Great Lakes. Before the close of the 17th century, Perrot's influence was supreme in the upper Mississippi, while d'Iberville was laying the foundations of Louisiana toward the mouth of the river. Nor is it without significance that while the Verendryes were advancing toward the northwest, where they discovered the Big Horn Mountains and revealed the natural boundaries of the valley, the Malay brothers were ascending the Platte, crossing the Colorado plains to Santa Fe, and so revealing the natural boundaries toward the southwest. To the English, the Great Valley was a land beyond the Alleghanies. Spotswood, the far-sighted governor of Virginia, predecessor of frontier builders, grasped the situation when he proposed western settlements to prevent the French from becoming a great people at the back of the colonies. He realized the importance of the Mississippi Valley as the field for expansion, and the necessity to the English empire of dominating it if England would remain the great power of the New World. In the war that followed between France and England, we now see what the men of the time could not have realized, that the main issue was neither the possession of the fisheries nor the approaches to the St. Lawrence on the one hemisphere, nor the possession of India on the other, but the mastery of the interior basin of North America. How little the nations realized the true meaning of the final victory of England is shown in the fact that Spain reluctantly received from France the cession of the lands beyond the Mississippi, accepting it as a means of preventing the infringement of her colonial monopoly in Spanish America rather than as a field for imperial expansion. But we now know that when George Washington came as a stripling to the camp of the French at the edge of the Great Valley and demanded the relinquishment of the French posts in the name of Virginia, he was demanding in the name of the English-speaking people the right to occupy and rule the real center of American resources and power. When Braddock's axemen cut their road from the Potomac toward the forks of the Ohio, they were opening a channel through which the forces of civilization should flow with ever-increasing momentum, and carving a cross on the wilderness rim at the spot which is now the center of industrial power of the American nation. England trembled on the brink of her great conquest, fearful of the effect of these far-stretching rivers upon her colonial system, timorous in the presence of the fierce peoples who held the vast domain beyond the Alleghanies. It seems clear, however, that the proclamation of 1763 forbidding settlement and the patenting of lands beyond the Alleghanies was not intended as a permanent creation of an Indian reservation out of this valley, but was rather a temporary arrangement in order that British plans might mature and a system of gradual colonization be devised. Already our greatest leaders, men like Washington and Franklin, have been quick to see the importance of this new area for enlarged activities of the American people. A sudden revelation that it was the West, rather than the ocean, which was the real theater for the creative energy of America, came with the triumph over France. The Ohio Company and the Loyal Land Company indicate the interest at the outbreak of the war, while the Mississippi Company, headed by the Washingtons and Lees, organized to occupy southern Illinois, Indiana, and western Kentucky, mark the Virginia interest in the Mississippi Valley, and Franklin's activity in promoting a colony in the Illinois country illustrates the interest of the Philadelphians. Indeed, Franklin saw clearly the possibilities of a settlement there as a means of breaking up Spanish America. Writing to his son in 1767, he declared that a settlement should be made in the Illinois country. raising a strength there which on occasions of a future war might easily be poured down the Mississippi upon the lower country and into the Bay of Mexico to be used against Cuba, the French islands, or Mexico itself. The Mississippi Valley had been the despair of France in the matter of governmental control. The coureurs de bois, escaping from restraints of law and order, took their way through its extensive wilderness, exploring and trading as they listed. Similarly, when the English colonists crossed the Alleghanies, they escaped from the control of mother colonies as well as of the mother country. If the Mississippi Valley revealed to the statesmen of the East, in the exultation of the war with France, an opportunity for new empire building, it revealed to the frontiersmen who penetrated the passes of the Alleghanies and entered into their new inheritance the sharp distinctions between them and the eastern lands which they left behind. From the beginning it was clear that the lands beyond the Alleghanies furnished an opportunity and an incentive to develop American society on independent and unconventional lines. The men of the Western waters broke with the old order of things, subordinated social restraint to the freedom of the individual, won their title to the rich lands which they entered by hard fighting against the Indians, hotly challenged the right of the East to rule them, demanded their own states, and would not be refused, spoke with contempt of the old social order of ranks and classes in the lands between the Alleghanies and the Atlantic, and proclaimed the ideal of democracy for the vast country which they had entered. Not with the mercurial facility of the French did they follow the river systems of the Great Valley. Like the advance of the glacier, they changed the face of the country in their steady and inevitable progress, and they sought the sea. It was not long before the Spaniards at the mouth of the river realized the meaning of the new forces that had entered the valley. In 1794, the governor of Louisiana wrote, "This vast and restless population progressively driving the Indian tribes before them and upon us, seek to possess themselves of all the extensive regions which the Indians occupy between the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Appalachian Mountains, thus becoming our neighbors, at the same time that they menacingly ask for the free navigation of the Mississippi. If they achieve their object, their ambitions would not be confined to this side of the Mississippi. Their writings, public papers, and speeches all turn on this point, the free navigation of the Gulf by the rivers which empty into it, the rich fur trade of the Missouri, and in time the possession of the rich mines of the interior provinces of the very kingdom of Mexico. Their mode of growth and their policy are as formidable for Spain as their armies. Their roving spirit and the readiness with which they procure sustenance and shelter facilitate rapid settlement. A rifle and a little cornmeal in a bag are enough for an American wandering alone in the woods for a month. With logs crossed upon one another, he makes a house, and even an impregnable fort against the Indians. Cold does not terrify him, and when a family wearies of one place, it moves to another and settles there with the same ease. If such men come to occupy the banks of the Mississippi and Missouri, or secure their navigation, doubtless nothing will prevent them from crossing and penetrating into our provinces on the other side, which, being to a great extent unoccupied, can oppose no resistance. In my opinion, a general revolution in America threatens Spain unless the remedy be applied promptly. In fact, the pioneers who had occupied the uplands of the South, the backwoods stock, with its Scotch-Irish leaders, which had formed on the eastern edge of the Alleghanies, separate and distinct from the type of Tidewater and New England, had found in the Mississippi Valley a new field for expansion under conditions of free land and unrestraint. These conditions gave it promise of ample time to work out its own social type. But, first of all, these men who were occupying the western waters must find an outlet for their surplus products if they were to become a powerful people. While the Alleghanies placed a veto toward the east, the Mississippi opened a broad highway to the south. Its swift current took their flatboats in its strong arms to bear them to the sea. But across the outlet of the great river, Spain drew the barrier of her colonial monopoly and denied them exit. The significance of the Mississippi Valley in American history at the opening of the new republic therefore lay in the fact that beyond the area of the social and political control of the 13 colonies, there had arisen a new and aggressive society, which imperiously put the questions of the public lands, internal communication, local self-government defense, and aggressive expansion before the legislators of the old colonial regime. The men of the Mississippi Valley compelled the men of the East to think in American terms instead of European. They dragged a reluctant nation on in a new course. From the Revolution to the end of the War of 1812, Europe regarded the destiny of the Mississippi Valley as undetermined. Spain desired to maintain her hold by means of the control given through the possession of the mouth of the river and the Gulf, by her influence upon the Indian tribes, and by intrigues with the settlers. Her object was primarily to safeguard the Spanish-American monopoly, which had made her a great nation in the world. Instinctively, she seemed to surmise that out of this valley were the issues of her future. Here was the lever which might break successively from her empire fragments about the Gulf: Louisiana, Florida, Texas, Cuba, and Puerto Rico, the Southwest and Pacific coast, and even the Philippines and the Isthmian Canal. While the American Republic, building itself on the resources of the valley, should become paramount over the independent republics into which her empire was to disintegrate. France, seeking to regain her former colonial power, would use the Mississippi Valley as a means of provisioning her West Indian islands, of dominating Spanish America, and of subordinating to her purposes the feeble United States, which her policy assigned to the lands between the Atlantic and the Alleghanies. The ancient Bourbon monarchy, the Revolutionary Republic, and the Napoleonic Empire all contemplated the acquisition of the whole valley of the Mississippi from the Alleghanies to the Rocky Mountains. England, holding the Great Lakes, dominating the northern Indian populations, and threatening the Gulf and the mouth of the Mississippi by her fleet, watched during the Revolution, the Confederation, and the early Republic for the breaking of the fragile bonds of the 13 states, ready to extend her protection over the settlers in the Mississippi Valley. Alarmed by the prospect of England's taking Louisiana and Florida from Spain, Jefferson wrote in 1790, "Embraced from St. Croix to St. Mary's, on one side by their possessions, on the other by their fleet, we need not hesitate to say that they would soon find means to unite them all the territory covered by the ramifications of the Mississippi, and that, he thought, must result in bloody and eternal war, or indissoluble confederacy with England." None of these nations deemed it impossible that American settlers in the Mississippi Valley might be won to accept another flag than that of the United States. Gardaquis had the effrontery in 1787 to suggest to Madison that the Kentuckians would make good Spanish subjects. France enlisted the support of frontiersmen led by George Rogers Clark for her attempted conquest of Louisiana in 1793. England tried to win support among the Western settlers. Indeed, when we recall that George Rogers Clark accepted a commission as Major General from France in 1793 and again in 1798, that Wilkinson, afterwards Commander-in-Chief of the American Army, secretly asked Spanish citizenship and promised renunciation of his American allegiance, that Governor Sevier of Franklin, afterwards Senator from Tennessee and its first governor as a state, Robertson, the founder of Cumberland, and Blount, governor of the Southwest Territory and afterwards Senator from Tennessee, were all willing to accept the rule of another nation sooner than see the navigation of the Mississippi yielded by the American government. We can easily believe that it lay within the realm of possibility that another allegiance might have been accepted by the frontiersmen themselves. We may well trust Rufus Putnam, whose federalism and devotion to his country had been proved, and whose work in founding New England's settlement at Marietta is well known, when he wrote in 1790 in answer to Fisher Ames's question whether the Mississippi Valley could be retained in the Union: "Should Congress give up her claim to the navigation of the Mississippi or cede it to the Spaniards, I believe the people in the western quarter would separate themselves from the United States very soon. Such a measure, I have no doubt, would excite so much rage and dissatisfaction that the people would sooner put themselves under the despotic government of Spain than remain the indented servants of Congress." He added that if Congress did not afford due protection also to these western settlers, they might turn to England or Spain. Prior to the railroad, the Mississippi Valley was potentially the basis for an independent empire. in spite of the fact that its population would inevitably be drawn from the eastern states. Its natural outlet was down the current to the Gulf. New Orleans controlled the valley, in the words of Wilkinson, as the key, the lock, or the citadel, the outworks. So long as the Mississippi Valley was menaced, or in part controlled by rival European states, just so long must the United States be a part of the state system of Europe, involved in its fortunes. And particularly was this the case in view of the fact that until the Union made internal commerce based upon the Mississippi Valley its dominant economic interest, the merchants and sailors of the northeastern states and the staple producers of the southern seaboard were a commercial appanage of Europe. The significance of the Mississippi Valley was clearly seen by Jefferson. Writing to Livingston in 1802, he declared, "There is on the globe one single spot, the possessor of which is our natural and habitual enemy. It is New Orleans, through which the produce of 3/8 of our territory must pass to market, and from its fertility it will ere long yield more than half of our whole produce and contain more than half of our inhabitants. The day that France takes possession of New Orleans fixes the sentence which is to restrain her within her low water mark. It seals the union of two nations who in conjunction can maintain exclusive possession of the ocean. From that moment we must marry ourselves to the British fleet and nation, holding the two continents of America in sequestration for the common purposes of the united British and American nations." The acquisition of Louisiana was a recognition of the essential unity of the Mississippi Valley. The French engineer Collot reported to his government after an investigation in 1796, "All the positions on the left, east, bank of the Mississippi, without the alliance of the western states, are far from covering Louisiana. When two nations possess, one the coasts and the other the plains, the former must inevitably embark or submit. From thence I conclude that the western states of the North American Republic must unite themselves with Louisiana and form in the future one single compact nation, or else that colony, to whatever power it shall belong, will be conquered or devoured." The effect of bringing political unity to the Mississippi Valley by the Louisiana Purchase was profound. It was the decisive step of the United States on an independent career as a world power, free from entangling foreign alliances. The victories of Harrison in the Northwest in the War of 1812 that followed ensured our expansion in the northern half of the valley. Jackson's triumphal march to the Gulf and his defense of New Orleans in the same war won the basis for that cotton kingdom so important in the economic life of the nation and so pregnant with the issue of slavery. The acquisition of Florida, Texas, and the far west followed naturally. Not only was the nation set on an independent path in foreign relations, its political system was revolutionized, for the Mississippi Valley now opened the way for adding state after state, swamping the New England section and its federalism. The doctrine of strict construction had received a fatal blow at the hands of its own prophet. The old conception of historic sovereign states, makers of a federation, was shattered by this vast addition of raw material for an indefinite number of parallelograms called states, nursed through a territorial period by the federal government, admitted under conditions, and animated by national rather than by state patriotism. The area of the nation had been so enlarged, and the development of the internal resources so promoted by the acquisition of the whole course of the mighty river, its tributaries, and its outlet, that the Atlantic coast soon turned its economic energies from the sea to the interior. Cities and sections began to struggle for ascendancy over its industrial life. A real national activity, a genuine American culture began. The vast spaces, the huge natural resources of the valley demanded exploitation and population. Later there came the tide of foreign immigration, which has risen so steadily that it has made a composite American people whose amalgamation is destined to produce a new national stock.